us, this will allow us to provide a YouTube video to relate to later if you want to. So, oak gall ink goes back a very long time. I've got feedback, I'm sorry. The recipe I'm working from is from the 1700s. As I was doing my research, I found that oak gall ink is a very flexible recipe. There are so many variations. Some are very simple, like this one. It only has 4 ingredients. Others used wine and vinegar and acids and really became quite involved. There was one from, pardon me a minute. There was a recipe from the early 1800s for the US Post Office that used oak gall ink. And oh my gosh, it had so many kinds of acid and dangerous stuff. So glad we're not using that. First, we're going to work with the oak galls. If you don't know what an oak gall is, they grow on oak trees where a wasp has been offending the tree. This one formed on a leaf. Sometimes they're on the little branches. And this is the way they look when they're wet. I brought this one in today and open it up so you can see inside. It's fairly hollow. And this one, because it's all over the floor, because it's fairly fresh, it got very thin skin. It's a young one. And it does have some pithy filling. Then as they get older, they get thicker and they're kind of gnarly looking. My squirrels love these, so this one's had a squirrel visitation. And they come large or small, like the one we broke open. And as they get older, they turn very dark. If you leave them outside in a pile of leaves, they get really dark. The tannic acid on the leaves leaches into them. So that's the main ingredient. Second ingredient is rainwater. Preferably rainwater. City water has chemicals in it. The rainwater helps to draw the color out of the oak galls. Next ingredient is gum arabic. It's probably showing up backwards, isn't it? It's gum arabic if you can't read backwards. And finally, iron sulfate. This is fairly accessible. You can get both those things from like Amazon or even your local hardware store or craft shop for the gum arabic. This is used in lawn treatment quite often. So it's easy to get, not terribly expensive. I think the gum arabic was $3 or $4. The iron sulfate was maybe $11 or $12, but this is 4 pounds and we only need a few ounces. So the first thing to do is take your oak galls and grind them up. Now, historically, they would have done this in a mortar and pestle or on a stone with another stone. The goal is to make them very fine, like powdery. If you look at my soaking jar here, you can see there's silt in the bottom, and that's where it was the finer part. I got very frustrated and gave up before it all went to powder, so I have large chunks because I'm like that. So grind up or pound your oak galls into a powder, a very fine powder. You need 4 ounces of oak gall for this recipe. As I said, it's very flexible. I've found so many variations of this. Then for this recipe, with 4 ounces of ground oak gall, it asked for a pint, which is 2 cups, of rainwater. The older the rainwater, the better, it says. Sounds vile, but you know, you place the oak galls in the rainwater in a container and let them sit. Toss them around a couple times a day if you think of it, and let them sit for at least 3 or 4 days, preferably a week. The longer it sits, the darker it gets. Anya has some experience with these, and she'll tell you that has not set very long because it's not terribly dark. You agree, Anya?
Yeah. I was going back and looking at our page because I have some vague recollection of needing to heat the water up.
Some
I'll come back
recipes
and
required that, but not all of them.
yeah, and I think that was because ours sat well. The bottle's been sitting now for like 3 years, but ours sat I think for overnight. I don't think it was more than that, but I'm double checking with the. I had talked with Antonia about this. Um, the and yeah, let's see. Added water, let it soak overnight, and added water and added water. um,
So every recipe, like I said,
yeah,
it's very
soak 20.
flexible. Very flexible.
Right, and it was just soaked 24 hours and strained. There was no heat involved.
Okay.
I had forgotten.
So this
Like I said,
recipe
it's been years ago.
recommended 3 or 4 days minimum, a week max. Because I am who I am, we're going to go ahead as if it's been a week. The next step, and I'm going to move my keyboard out of this because water. The next step is to take this lovely, mucky, slimy mess and strain the oak gall out of the liquid. Historically, they would have used cheesecloth, so I'm being cheesy. And I'm not sure my bowl is, yeah, my bowl is big enough. Okay. So we're going to strain the oak gall. And it does have quite a lot of dye in it. It's already colored that cheesecloth. I don't know if you can see that color. It's already picking color up, wicking color up through the threads, kind of an ochre color. I'm going to strain that, squeeze it rather well. Hate to waste it. That lovely goopy rainwater. Okay. Now, the recipe I'm working from, as Anya and I have discussed, variation seems to be common. It requires 1 ounce of gum arabic. This is 1 ounce of gum arabic. I thought, is that 1 ounce by weight or 1 ounce by volume? So I did a lot of research on that. Every recipe is different. So I am acting as if I am in a place where I don't have a scale and I'm going with volume. So 4 ounces of oak gall, 1 pint of rainwater, and 1 ounce of gum arabic, which it says to dissolve in water. So I'm going to dissolve it in here. Stop me if this is going to be a disaster now, Anya. I don't know how well this is going to dissolve. I have not, let's see, get where you can see that. It's actually dissolving fairly quickly. Now here is where I would think warmth would be a benefit, to dissolve gum arabic in water. But again, this recipe in no way indicated it should be heated up. In fact, most of the recipes I looked at did not. I saw 2 that did, but get my hands out of the way a little bit here. The gum arabic is added so that your ink will stick to your vellum or whatever it is you're writing on. Without that, if you've ever tried working with vellum, you know that water will just bead up on it. It needs to have something that is going to cause a little stickiness. Catherine, are you in the kitchen? Oh, Terry, would you be willing to bring me the smallest wire whisk? Because I see my little spoon is not whisking this gum arabic the way I was hoping. As I said, you're learning with me. This is, I think, kind of the fun of doing things together in the SCA. I love
We
having.
ended up
Go ahead.
we ended up just shaking it,
Ah,
literally just shaking the bleep out of it and to get it to dissolve.
thank you very much. Yeah, had my jar not had oak gall still stuck in it, that might have been a good idea. So we have a fat little piggy to whisk our gum arabic with. I love having events where we have a real experienced professional to teach us, but I also like learning together. So we're going to wire whisk the dickens out of this, and it is working. Not unlike shaking the jar, right? Shaking the dickens out of it. Almost there, guys. Can you imagine being a clerk in a cool room in a dark somewhere by candlelight working on your ink? Their gum arabic would have been rather like chunks of resin, like tree pitch. And they would have had to pound that to a powder first and then try to get it to dissolve in the water. Where again, I think heat might have been beneficial for that. Don't know how this would be.
Yeah, gum arabic dissolves better in hot water than it does in cold water.
It is, however, dissolving fairly well.
Yeah, it will go. It will.
We're almost there.
And I'm going to repost.
Go ahead.
I'm going to repost the link in the chat for the page that we've got because we used a slightly different method, and so ours is all just photos, though, photos and writing.
Yep. And if you could also post your link in the discussion under this event, these events will stay posted on the Baronial page. And
okay,
the link for the Zoom, the YouTube recording will be there after a few days. And if you want to go back and look at all of the recordings from these, you could look under SCA capital letters, Alantha, my first name. If you look at the ID there, it'll show you how to spell that. And that will connect you with all of the A and S recordings we have made.
It doesn't like my, it doesn't want to let me post it.
Oh. We are having
We're having trouble completing the request. Okay, I'll just go over on the Audiantum page and post it there.
I don't know that it's going to make a lot of difference. We have a few little bits left. And I don't think it's very entertaining to watch me stir, even though it is a cute little piggy. So I think we'll just move on. It's getting very thick, by the way. Kind of like when you mix Jell-O when it's cold and you can tell it's starting to thicken even though it's cold.
Yeah. What's interesting is that after a couple of weeks, it's not thick anymore. It's just that first, I commented on it on our page as well. It's just that first few days where it stays really thick. And we had a foam layer on ours probably because we were shaking it.
Well, there's a bit of foam built up here too.
Yeah. But the foam layer over time vanished. Foam. Yeah.
Okay. So the next ingredient is 4 ounces, and again, I'm using volume, not weight, of iron sulfate. And This is not something I would ordinarily do in my living room, but what the heck? I don't know how wonderful this stuff would be if I got it on things. I was going to spoon it into this bottle because I'm using volume. If this is 1 ounce of iron sulfate or of gum arabic by volume, then 4 of these would be 4 ounces of iron sulfate by volume. And I have a helper here. See that black nose? He's trying to see what I'm doing. It must smell interesting. The iron sulfate probably has an aroma. So I'm going to just dip this in. And we will stir from there. One ringy dingy. Okay, that was an old person joke for you young folks from an old TV show called Laugh In. 2 ringy dingy. More. 3. Roughly 3 ounces by volume of iron sulfate. Going for 4. There we go. 4 ounces of iron sulfate by volume. Oh, and it's very thick now. Feels like I'm stirring mud. And can you see the change in color immediately on adding the iron sulfate? It is now black, where before it was kind of a rusty brown. I'm going to take a moment and take this off my hands because it feels kind of gritty and unpleasant. I recommend wearing gloves next time. Learning as we go. Okay. Now, I had COVID about 1.5 years ago, lost my sense of taste and smell, and it's only barely beginning to come back to me, randomly and bizarrely. But right now, I'm tasting iron in the air. So I'm assuming this has an unpleasant smell, but I don't know. Anya, do you remember anything about that?
Yes, it was not the most pleasant of smells. It's not vile. We had the doors closed at the shop while we were working on it. And afterwards, I kind of went, let's go ahead and open things up and air it out. But it wasn't bad.
Yes, this is very thick.
Oh my.
Look at that.
Yeah.
It's already a
And by the way, the recipe on our page is really different from what you just did.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it was same ingredients, but the proportions are totally different. And we used moss out for the iron
Which
sulfate.
has the iron sulfate.
Yeah.
So I'm closing this up because I think that is where the iron taste is coming from. That is what I've just stirred. All right. Now it says to allow this to sit in your containers, bottle it up, and turn it every few days for about a week. And then it's supposed to be ready to go. So we will see when we meet again in 2 weeks how this has turned out.
Yeah.
Any questions, any input, any contributions? I am open. Crickets. Okay. So I kind of like this learning process because as I was researching and getting recipes from several hundred years, the ingredients primarily stayed the same until it got up to about the 1800s when they started adding other acids. The proportions were dramatically different from time to time, but it's still the same ingredients: gum arabic, oak gall, iron sulfate in one form or another, and water. Definitely do not use your city water if you're doing this. I think that would add some chemicals that just would cause some confusion. I don't know how that would work. We don't want anyone blowing up. I'm not a chemist. I don't know these things, but it would make me nervous. So there is that. Anybody have any questions or anything they want to add about that? It really was a very simple process. And I think,
So will you rinse the jar out that you had the galls? Um,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
and then just put it in there and age it, I guess.
I think I'm going to put it in other small jars so that it could be used as ink by a variety of people. And it stains already. Can you see that on my hand?
Yes.
It's already ink.
Instead of rainwater, could you use plain old distilled water?
Hmm.
I would think so.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that
and
probably.
we use spring water. We have a local spring that's um, has a lot of iron in it, but in the water. But other than that, there's no city chemicals or anything.
Well, I have a well, and I think my well water would be just as well as good because it's rainwater. You know, it filters down through the earth, and there it is. So there's not a lot of difference. As I said, you can get these ingredients. Oh, I was looking for this earlier. Yay! You can get these ingredients off Amazon, the iron sulfate and the gum arabic. And I heard a chime. I'm looking to see what we have. There are some questions online for those that don't have audio. Filtered water. If your water is fluoridated, don't play junior chemist, Alan says. Yes, yes, very much. Iridium says, wait a minute. Okay, I'm backing up to catch some questions that I missed earlier. Athena recommended good ventilation, at least when using the iron sulfate. I agree with that 100%. I'm in a very large room. Walnut ink is very acidic. It'll eat paper in time. Thank you, Ellen. That's interesting. And Iridium says all iron gall inks eat paper eventually due to the residual iron salts. Sir Brand says, I wonder if the recipe changed due to paper use versus parchment versus rag linen. That's an interesting question. I don't know. I would think more acid would actually be harsher on the paper and rag linen that came later after parchment. Anybody know anything about that?
Yes, it does eat paper a lot faster than it does parchment, and the use of the iron to make black dye for fabric is why the Jane Bostock sampler has holes in it. That's the oldest dated sampler that's out there. Um, and there are places where the thread has completely vanished, and it's all the black thread that's doing that. But yeah, it the iron gall ink is just, it eats things. It also will eat pen nibs. Don't leave a steel pen nib in it.
Oh, that's good to know. I wonder if it would have any effect on the feather nibs. I think if it's going
If
to
you,
eat through parchment
yeah,
eventually, then it would eat through those eventually. That might be part of
yeah,
why they wear out.
yeah. We had a ink pot that I left a quill and a steel nib and a copper nib in. And I ended up noticing the one day that the pens were suddenly shorter because the copper nib went away completely. And
Wow.
the steel nib rusted so badly that it shredded when I tried to use it. The quill just sort of lost the point, but it had been sitting down in the gunk at the bottom. We did discover that over time it does settle and it leaves a goopy layer on the bottom. I'm assuming it's the gum arabic that's doing that, but the rest of the ink continues to work just fine.
Hmm.
So
Well, actually, I'm a little concerned about leaving it in my antique bowl here for very long. I'll have to get my techie guru to. Oh, she won't want to touch this. She doesn't like goopy things. It really is very
yeah,
thick.
we kept it in a canning jar so that it stayed
Yeah,
airtight.
the jar is my ultimate destination for this, but I didn't want to have to pour that here at the desk. I may have to. We'll see. Oh, Magda, welcome. Okay. So any other questions or input on the ink? I'm ready to move on to the next little piece, but I don't want to rush anyone if they have any questions.
Yeah, how should you store the ink?
Well, as Anya was saying, it needs to be in glass. And if you're going to have a metal lid, I would definitely make sure that it's got some kind of ceramic lining that would protect the metal from the ink.
And should it be out of light, in light, in a certain temperature?
Just speaking on general principle, I think out of light would prevent it from bleaching, and not too warm because that's going to cause some shifting in its viscosity. Those are my guesses.
What we did with the inks that we've got at the shop, they're little tiny bottles with a cork. And the ink does not appear to eat the corks. But then once we had them solidly corked, we dipped them in beeswax. And having used some recently, this was 2018 when we set this all up. Having used some recently, it's other than that gunk layer on the bottom, they haven't changed at all. And stuff that we had put in a glass bottle with a plastic top, it wasn't one of the watertight canning jar lids, it was a storage lid, and that one kind of dried up a little bit. You can see there's I keep forgetting the camera's over here. There's about that much of staining above the ink level in that one. The one in the canning jar with a standard canning jar lid has not changed level at all. And like I said, it's been sitting for 4 years, so.
Interesting. Well, I don't know about any of you, but my family never gets rid of anything. And as I was going through boxes and years of accumulation, you're laughing, I see you. I found some bottles of ink that had belonged to my mother and my grandmother, and they were tightly sealed and had evaporated. So even when we think they're tightly sealed, there is still evaporation. Now, these had plastic or rubber lids. One of them had a metal screw-on lid from the more recent 1950s. So I think evaporation is an issue with them in almost anything after time.
I have some speedball inks from the 1970s that have evaporated enough that they're hard to use because they're too thick. They didn't dry up, but and one of those had a waxed cork, and the other one had a standard plastic, the regular old bottle lid.
Wow. Okay, I am going to do something terribly rude. I'm going to leave you here for a minute because my hands are feeling like I've got desiccant on them. I've got to go wash my hands after getting that iron on them. But look at what the ink is doing. Where I didn't even know I had touched myself with it. That's some powerful ink. Better be a great clothing dye. I will be right back. Talk among yourselves. Unmute. Have fun.
My main question was to make the ink less alkaline or more alkaline, less acidic. Somebody mentioned chalk. Anybody have any experience with that?
If a comment on one of the websites that I used for a source, and I don't remember which one it was now, said that if you make it more alkaline, the iron comes out of solution.
You can add just a tiny bit of chalk,
And
and that'll affect your color a little bit. It'll make it a little bit more blue and a little less transparent. But yeah, you don't want to add much, just a tiny bit.
The main reason why I was thinking making it less acidic, more alkaline, would be to help to prevent it from eating the the what you're putting it on. Since as the acidic nature of it would cause it to disintegrate whatever you put it on.
The comment in the chat by Iridium is he lists an article that mentions that modern iron gall inks use an acid that can evaporate instead of sulfuric acid. There are also a couple modern recipes given, though for precision, you'd need to use pure extracted chemicals instead of using galls.
All right. More information. Where did you find that?
Wikipedia.org, iron gall ink is what he's got listed.
Wiki does have some information you can trust now and then. So most of the ink washed off pretty easily with soapy water, but I am going to take it out of that bowl because I love that bowl and I don't want to risk it being abused.
No. Now, thing I've found about Wikipedia is as long as it's got well-established sources, you can trust it.
Just got to do some research and double check those sources.
Oh yeah, always double check and triple check your sources. Always. I learned that in like grade school, junior high.
You may be watching a disaster in the making here. I forgot the funnel. See how thick that is? It's practically syrup. Interesting. I have parchment under this. I hope it's going to protect things. And I am going to disappear again and take this to the other room and rinse it off very quickly. Hate to do that to you, but talk among yourselves. I'll be right back.
Looks like it shouldn't stain your bowl too badly if you get it rinsed off real quick.
Yeah, we used glass and it didn't seem to stick to the glass at all. I was just looking at the pictures on the site, And I know that the bottle that is floating around, oh, and there's a picture of the process of the waxing of the corks and stuff at the bottom. But the bottle that I've got in the back, it doesn't seem to have stuck at all. You know, when you shake it, you know, of course it stains the side, but then it dribbles back down.
That's the cool thing about glass. It resists a lot. You can use it for just about anything.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, I've seen glass dip pens. Those would be good for using with more acidic inks because they won't eat the glass.
I'd never thought of that. I've got a pen. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, and because of the way
Trying to figure where it is.
the way the tip is designed, you'll write forever with that ink in there. And yeah, it should hold up to the black ink just fine. Because like I said, glass resists pretty much everything. You can put hydrochloric acid in a glass jar and it's not going to do anything to the glass.
Rudest host ever, walking off and leaving you alone twice. So, anything wonderful happened while I was gone? You're an awful quiet bunch.
Oh, we were talking about how glass resists a lot of things. And I said, well, there's those glass dip pens that you can use that the ink won't do anything with. And she's like, I didn't even think of that.
I actually have one of those right behind me.
Yeah, the acidic ink won't hurt the glass pens. And because of the way they're designed with that, all those multiple channels, you can sit there and write forever with one of those.
I'm going to grab my pen. It's right behind me so that I can show you that one so everyone knows what we're talking about.
Yep.
I have to vanish for a minute. I'll be.
There are so many different variations on pens. Turn this around.
I actually often wonder if the glass dip pens are strictly a modern thing or if they actually go further back. Yeah, I love those things.
I don't have any history on that. Do you know anything about that, Anya or Alan? I do know that the wooden handle with a metal tip goes back quite a long ways. And the design is, see if I can get the light right here. On the glass pen, put it in front of something black. There we go. It's got spiral runs the way it was blown or twisted and pulled as it was heated. And that's what holds the ink in these little spiral rivulets. On the metal nib that we're all more familiar with, it has sort of a spring tension piece inside and the split on the top that the ink is run through. It kind of directs it, and that's where our reservoir is. But on the quill pen, your reservoir is actually in the small split, there is a small split here that I can put my fingernail in, which, kind of ruins the pen, but we're learning. And that is your direction. And then the ink is held up here as it is dipped. Surface tension holds some in there so that it holds ink as you're writing. Which takes us on to making a quill pen.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm sitting here in the office, not wanting to annoy everybody else who's still in the office. But your glass pens were developed in Venice, and that would be slightly, ever so slightly post period. So that would be 1700s.
Thank you. Good information. Okay, so we see a lot of movies or romantic things where they have the long, lovely pen, longer than your forearm, and it looks so elegant, and it's totally impractical. The fletching on the pen, on the feather, is meant to lift air. And if you take a feather and whoosh it through the air, you can feel the resistance. And if you're trying to do fine writing, as small as that difference is, it does affect your accuracy if you leave all of those lovely, beautiful things on there. So the first thing you do when you take a feather to turn it into a quill is to cut off that beautiful big top part. Seems a shame, but there it goes. And you want to leave enough that it gives you support as we're writing in the style that we write. Okay. And then these other beauties have to come off, and they rather simply, if you get the right spot, you can peel them right off. I had trouble finding that right spot. And clearly I'm having trouble again. These are turkey feathers, by the way. There it goes.
Primary, secondary, do you know? Tail feathers?
Yes,
Does
the
it matter?
pinion feathers. The best ones to use are the primary flight feathers. They have the strongest part here.
Well, not surprisingly, that's also what I'm looking for in order to make fletchings for arrows. Pretty much
Ah.
the same reason.
Yep.
Now, I have seen a few who leave a little bit on the top. I think that's aesthetic value. Either that or they have trouble getting it off. I don't know. They do look rather sad once you've denuded them. And then you can take the edge of your knife and kind of shave it down to take off the little bit that's left. And it does make a bit of a dreadful mess. I wish I had grabbed another sheet of parchment to catch my mess. The maid will get this in the morning, you know. That's a joke. I'm the maid. Let's see. I think I've moved my camera a little bit here. You can see it's still pretty raggedy. It wouldn't change how it functions at this point to leave that. Now it is just aesthetic. As my grandmother said, any job worth doing is worth doing well. So we're going to take a moment and try to remove as much of that as I can. Maybe, no, laying down is not the answer.
You might try sandpaper.
There's an idea. This does a good job. It's just slow, bit tedious. I tried earlier to do one with a different knife. Wasn't very sharp at all. Don't do that. You want a very sharp knife. Your feathers should be at least 6 months off the bird. That allows them to cure and become hard. Let's see if I can you hear that? I don't know if you can hear that or not. It's very hard. Makes a tapping sound. When a feather is first plucked from the bird, it's soft and pliable a little bit, and it won't serve you well. Get the light right. So we have denuded the stick. Now we're going to cut just the tip off because we won't be using that. And find how it's going to sit in your hand. You could use it like that, but it doesn't want to stay there. In my hand, there's a position that's comfortable where that kind of lays in this gap here where I would be writing. That tells me this will need to be the bottom of my pen. Flip it over. And now we're going to shave off about an inch or so of the bottom half. I'm going to show you what I peeled off, and there it is. See, we took that off, this bottom piece. Now when I run my thumb along it, my thumb goes inside that shaft. See if I can get a good picture for you. This lighting is questionable. It's just not showing. So inside the quill is some I don't even know what to call that. Alan, do you have a word for that? For the stuff that's inside a quill? Is there a special word for that?
Pith.
H-I-F-F?
Nope. P-I-T-H, like the
Ah.
helmet.
Thank you. Yes, you want to remove the pithy stuff inside. All right. So now we have I guess you'll have to take my word for it. I can't get a good shot. We have half a quill. And we've taken it back to about here. That gives you the beginning. Now we're going to go down to about the last ½ inch. And, well, actually, back up. We're going to make this a bit of a curve. And then go to the last ½ inch and take a bit of a curve again toward the tip. Can you see that it's pulling off both sides there? Now we've got an open quill, and it's got, can you see the curve on the side? Let's see, right there. It curves down on that front piece. And I'm going to take it down just a little bit more. All right. Finding something, somewhere I can put that in front of the black. Now the next step is to make sure it's narrow enough. It needs to be a little narrower, so I'm going to come in a bit more on the side. I'm just taking tiny shavings off because I don't want to go too far and have to start over. All right. Okay, where are we? Everything's backwards. I feel like I'm working in a mirror here. So we're going to take this knife blade and put it in the center of the tip and pop that tip so that it splits up about a 1/2 inch. We don't want to cut it all the way up. We want it to split.
So it is being recorded?
Mhm.
And that is the reservoir
Or not.
guide. I'm looking for some way I can give you a background where you can see that. Each quill's different, and the one I had earlier was dark, so that showed up a lot faster. Let's see, maybe against this black. So there is a gap right there at the end. We want to cut the end so that it's straight across. That will be your writing tip, just like the metal nib that we were looking at earlier. Now this is a very fine one, so it's got a very small nib end, but it's flat across. This is a much wider one because I'm not a craftsman. I am learning as we go. So that's the principle of making a quill. The art of it is to do it enough times that you do it gracefully and with ease and end up with a successful quill at the end. I think I have a long way to go, but it's going to be fun to get there. If anyone has need of turkey feathers, I have a few and I could mail some to you. You could just PM me a mailing address and I would send a couple off, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, because I have a source that will provide me with turkey feathers a couple times a year if I ask. So any questions, any comments, any advice, I'm open to hear it. Anya, have you made quills before? Oh, scrolling through a lot of missed questions. Hang on. Ostrich feathers would function as well. I don't have a resource for those, but I think that would be fun. Peacocks ran wild and would come into the yard and eat up all our strawberries. I collected feathers from those pests. Oh, they'd be lovely, but you still have to cut the purdies off. They would make a nice long quill. Alan said when he was in college, peacocks ran wild. Yeah, he's the one that said that. Okay, Michelle was asking about other feathers and got the answer. Halima, peacock tail feathers make pens like toothpicks and are miserable to try to write with. Okay, now there's information we didn't know about. Halima, I have seen some peacock feathers that were pretty hefty at the bottom. Are they still not, by the time you're done, they just won't make a decent quill?
If they are flight feathers, they're good, but the tail feathers, I have been given a multitude of feathers to experiment with, and I was not impressed with the results you get from the peacock tail feathers. They tended to be solid in the center, and so it's just like writing with a stick.
Oh dear.
Not happy with those at all. The flight feathers work. I would encourage people to look for the larger birds and flight feathers. I've collected actual crow feathers to make a crow quill, and it really works.
Well, if you ask them nicely, they'll bring you feathers. So you don't have to
Always
eliminate
worth
the
a
crowd.
try.
Yeah.
Give them shiny things.
Your peacock primary flight feathers are kind of a rust red. It's a beautiful color, but not what you expect when you say peacock.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people are like, "Ooh, I want peacock fletching," and they're thinking of the tail feathers, but that isn't what you use. They're just generic rust colored flight feathers. Look like giant plain rust colored feathers.
All right.
They're not the shiny blue that the rest of the bird is.
Alan posted some information a little earlier in the chat that the best feathers for making quill are the first 5 flight feathers or primaries. For a medieval scribe in Europe, goose feathers were probably most commonly used. They were easier to get. Swan was considered superior. In North America, turkey have been quite popular for quills. Okay. Trying to catch up on the chat there. Iridium said, I brought some egret quills home once to try quill making, and all I got was a moth infestation. Used to work right next to the egret rookery. Do you happen to know which part of the egret your quill feathers came from, Iridium? Hadn't thought of the moth issue when bringing home feathers. I'm prone to picking them up out of the yard when I find them just because I think they're pretty. But I haven't found any that would be appropriate for making a quill from.
Good heavens. Do please put any and all feathers you find in the freezer. Moths are fairly benign compared to lice and various other little things you might find with feathers. So yeah, into the freezer they go.
Okay. I guess I'd better go get my little jar of feathers I brought. I have a little vase in my book cabinet that I pop them into when I bring them in. So I guess maybe you're right. That's a really wise suggestion.
One thing that I have done and my mother has done for many, many years is when we would find feathers, we would basically put them in soapy water and use a very, very soft bristle toothbrush to gently brush them and then lay them to dry in order to actually wash the feathers. And then once they're dry, you can just gently smooth them out again, just like with the way birds do when they straighten out their quills.
And because you're going to be removing that anyway, if you're making a quill, that's really not so critical. I mean, if you've scrubbed them and they're kind of raggedy looking, you're still going to remove that.
Yeah, but for feathers that you want to keep for other purposes, and you want to wash them, you just very gently and you run it from the shaft along, following the barbs from shaft to edge with fine bristle toothbrush in soapy water, and then lay them out to dry.
Okay.
And then once you're, like I said, you can just smooth them out with your fingertips.
More good information. Camera seems to have moved. Well, as I said, I am in no way experienced at these things, but I wanted us to have a time of doing things together where we learn together. I really regret that we can't meet in person where we all have a feather or several and practice this together and learn together. That's what I'd love for ANS to be working on. Those of you who've done this, Alan, Anya, maybe some others here, I really value your input because you have things to teach us. That's where we all gain from gathering together, whether it's virtual or in person.
I did post something in the chat that I dare not say out loud here in the office, but it is important to read.
Okay. Is that the link that you posted on government bird policies?
That would be the one.
Okay. I'm going to open that up on my phone because I fear if I do it on my computer, I'll end up with a disaster. Unless someone else would like to risk pulling that. Let me try to get it on my phone. It just means I've got to enter the chat on my phone as well. And that's always a bit of a challenge. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, you might scroll just a little bit above that. There's a previous comment that the link clarifies.
Okay. I'll go there first.
One question I had is if you made it long enough and you left like just the very top inch of the feather, because I've actually seen that done in a number of movies and shows where they just left the barbs on a very top inch, but the whole rest of it was stripped. Would that be enough that it would not affect your writing?
You know, I'm not one of those who does the very intricate calligraphy. So I'm speculating that the length of a long quill would have an effect on the steadiness of your hand. So if you're writing along, you can see that the pen moves at the end. And if it's got a little weight at the end, that might have an effect. That's just speculation because I am not a scribe. Anyone here a scribe that might have some input on that? We see a lot of things in the movies and shows that are just not appropriate. And it's hard to know what is and what isn't until we've done our deep research.
Yeah, Hollywood should never do history because they never do it right.
Which
Well,
is
not-
why
In fact, I think the SCA should sue Hollywood for its inaccurate portrayals of history.
Okay, Alan said, I usually don't give out legal advice, but collecting feathers from darn near any bird might get you into trouble with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, like serious trouble. Okay, without opening that link, and everyone could copy that link and open it later to read, I do know that eagle feathers are a flat out no-no unless you're a Native American. Protected birds of any sort, you cannot have their feathers as far as I understand. And I'll wager that your link specifies all those details, doesn't it, Alan?
Oh, it goes way past that. Let me tell you what's safe. Chickens are safe. Pigeons are safe. Yeah.
How do we feel about crows and raven?
You're trying to get in trouble with my boss, aren't you?
Oh, no, sorry. So very sorry.
Basically, unless it's like a super common city bird, like domesticated thing, you shouldn't be scavenging. If someone has a hunting license for that type of bird, make friends with them.
Oh, okay.
As for crows and ravens, as far as I'm aware, please double check this. Ravens, no. Crows, okay. Because they are so incredibly common and they're everywhere. You frequently find scads of crow feathers, but raven feathers would be a no because they are protected. I don't know about crows. As far as I'm aware, that it would be okay to have those because they're so common. But double check.
Okay. Very good to have. Okay, you're going to see me pop in here twice now. And I'm shining a light in our eyes. Okay, without video.
Recording in progress.
Okay. I'm looking for out. Okay, I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
mute me for a minute.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, yeah. My boss just left the office. I was stopped by Mr. Game Warden, who noticed that I was picking up seagull feathers. It's common herring seagull feathers. And he showed me where even common seagulls are considered migratory birds. I went, nothing migratory about them. So, well, look at this list. And the list is incredibly detailed, and it goes on for pages. So yeah, what you need to do is you need to look Mr. Game Warden in the eye and say, these are chicken feathers.
Yeah, a lot of that legislation was drafted in response to people going around basically scavenging feathers to use for fashion when that was more of a thing. And they would actually go find nesting migratory birds and harass them because a lot of them molt at the same time that their chicks or fledglings. And so they'd go up to the nests, freak all the birds out until they ran away, pick up a bunch of molted feathers, and, harass the birds in not okay ways. So a lot of that came from just trying to protect birds from a redonkulous fashion industry that was, messing with bird populations.
I would
Yeah.
speculate that not only did some unscrupulous folk do that, there were probably others that were going out and killing birds to take the feathers and then claiming they just found them.
Just so the women's hat industry practically forced to extinction a lot of your egrets and your other birds. That I think was one of the reasons why Malheur was one of the first designated sanctuaries, because they said, if we don't start putting up bird sanctuaries, there's not going to be any birds left. So at the time, it was a sensible reaction to a ridiculous fashion. Nowadays, I don't see very many women who wear hats, and those who do very rarely have feathers in them. So it's not really the problem that it used to be, but still, there you are.
Well, I agree with you. I don't wear hats often, but I have some of my grandmother's hats that I wear from time to time. And a few of those do have feathers on them. So probably illicit feathers at this stage.
Seriously, I think those could be grandfathered in.
Possibly.
In all probability. Yeah.
I think a lot of that came from the whole teens and 20s, 19 teens and 20s fashion and into the 30s. Fun fact, anything you can do to your hair, you can do to a feather, including using a hair iron on it.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it's the same exact material. If you can do it to your hair, you can do it to a feather and it'll hold up.
Now, my lady, I regret to point out that what I do to feathers is almost the opposite of what you do. I am stripping the fletchings off to put on arrows. So the part you're throwing out is the part that I'm keeping. The part that you're keeping, I throw out.
Perhaps we could work together on this.
I think not, though, because I'm pulling off enough of the quill to keep the feathers in place. So it's kind of like I'm eating the banana peel and you're eating the banana. I don't think it would be quite that nice of a division. We're both wanting that one little bit where
that
the
middle
two
ground.
meet. Yeah, we both are after that middle ground where the two meet.
Well, I think there's probably enough turkeys in the world to accommodate that.
Now, it's quite possible that I would be wanting the if you're only wanting the first couple inches,
these bits,
yeah, I would probably be wanting the rest. So it could be next Thanksgiving. There's a number of places that raise heritage turkeys, and that's all waste. And I keep telling them, you could sell these things if you go down to Three Rivers Archery Supply and find out how much they sell per feather. It would blow your socks off. You'd say, we're throwing away, about $1,000
Yeah.
worth of quill. Yeah, you are, but it is labor intensive. So we could go down, and I would want to chop up the feathers immediately, and you could lovingly age yours until they're nice and hard and brittle, and I'd be stripping them down while it's still nice and soft and flexible.
I think we can work together on
Yeah,
this.
we could work something out.
So are these portions here parts that you would like to have? Because this is what was cut off.
As I say, I think yours are probably what I would consider past their sell-by date.
Okay. So where I get my feathers is through our local gleaners group. When they have a turkey harvest, they just discard these. And I said, oh, no, no, no. So when that occurs again, shall I call upon you and say, it's feather time?
Do please let me know when feathers are in season.
Okay.
And what we can get is if we have a letter confirming from the source saying, why, yes, come on by and, take as many feathers as you want. And you keep that letter because somewhere down the line, Mr. ODF and W said, are these, especially your heirloom turkeys that look so much like the wild turkeys, you are going to want to keep some sort of a proof that you have not been poaching.
These are domestic turkeys that are being harvested. And
While what
generally,
you say is true, your domestic heirloom turkeys look very much like they're not the big white butterball turkeys that Mr. Game Warden is familiar with.
okay, good to know.
I mean, what's the cost of keeping hard copy of a letter? I mean, it's insurance.
It might be something that we would need to request because generally this is done as a group. They're done online. It's turkeys are ready. Who wants turkeys? I'll take turkeys. And then I chime in and say, can I have feathers? And it's all done online. There's never anything in writing. So it's something we could request and work with.
In my office, I'm allowed to say this. We say this a lot. Get it in writing.
Got it. Got it. Good.
Yeah, there's two different domestic turkeys that he's talking about. What most people think of are the solid white, big fat ones.
Yep.
The heirloom ones are the ones that still have the color on them. And they're very distinct.
Like this group of feathers that I was showing you.
Those would be off an heirloom. Yeah.
Okay.
Because regular domestic turkeys that are the big fat ones, they're solid white, which is where you get all those nice, pretty, pristine white turkey wing feathers that you can get at craft stores. Are from those.
They're supposed to look like sad little sticks.
They're supposed to look like sad little sticks. My techie guru is here saying, did you decimate your feathers? And I showed her, and she says, I don't think that's what they're supposed to look like. They look like sad little sticks. Yes, I'm afraid they are.
That's historically accurate.
Historically accurate, sad little sticks. Yes.
Oh dear God.
So many wonderful things we learn, huh?
Yeah, frequently what they use those white, those nice big pristine white turkey feathers. People will take them and they'll heat them and flatten them, and then they'll trim them and dye them to look like other feathers. My mother had taken one and trimmed it down and dyed it to look like a red-tailed hawk flight feather.
Ah.
Now,
so that's what those are usually used for.
Okay.
I'm holding up a feather I have. My boss is gone because otherwise I would totally have my ear nailed to a wall. This is a wild turkey feather. You compare it to your domestic turkey feather. And you'll see that there's a difference in color. And mine is kind of a dark chocolate brown, and I think yours is more of a black.
Mm,
There is a difference, but boy, you know, if you've got if you've got an angry sheriff, you know, as I say, no,
yeah, not an argument I'd like to try and win.
yeah, it's the sort of argument we make, but it it's a lot of effort when we get involved. Yeah, the turkey feather I've got here is from the local Fifth Street mob. They're quite funny. They roost in one of the trees right here downtown, and there's about a dozen of them. I see them frequently down at Alton Baker Park.
I think they're wonderful.
But you know, they're not indigenous. I would have to, you know, I would have to read the regulations, as my boss is always saying. Always read the regulations and see what it says. It says what it says, and not what you think it says. That's it. So, yeah, that link that I opened up goes on for several pages. I'll have to check and see what it says about turkeys.
Okay. I'm going to have to do some research there. Find out if I'll be in trouble for my turkey feathers.
Yours are domestically raised.
That's what they tell me.
Well, I
believe them.
I have no reason to doubt. It's
It's
a lot
not-
easier harvesting domestic turkeys than harvesting wild ones. I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
Now, what I would not do is I probably would not hang this on your rear view mirror. I see a lot of people who hang feathers at the rear view mirror. And if you have an upset police officer, that's just an invitation, you know, just
Make his
don't.
bad day worse.
Just don't do that. Just, you know, keep them at home, but not on the rear view mirror. No.
How about on our SCA garb, Alan? Because I have seen lots of folk at events that have feathers dangling from pouches or various other bits and pieces. Do you think that's
Nope,
risky?
not going to comment. Not going to comment. Not
Got
gonna,
it.
Some other
Got the
time, perhaps,
unspoken.
but not here. No, this is being recorded. Nope.
We could end the recording now. We are on the chit chat.
Ask me another day.
I will end this recording now for those who care.